Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of What We Should Know, coming to you from Cambridge Community Television at 438 Mass Avenue here in Cambridge. And our guest today is Paul Stephen Stone. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Terrence. Pleasure to be here.
Paul Stephen Stone writes terrific ads for the Bernie campaign, and we've featured them on a number of issues here. Thank you ever so much for your work in that campaign.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's just, it's been a personal kind of quest for me and my art director friend who does the design. We've enjoyed it immensely. And when Bernie wins, when he wins the nomination, we're going to move on to a second phase, which is the general election phase.
That would be great.
Yeah, so keep your eyes peeled. You'll see it here first.
So that's a subject that we can talk about a little later in the show. But first off, you've moved. You've relocated.
I have. I now live in Plymouth. I've left the environs of Cambridge behind me. I'm no longer a Canterbridgian after 27 years of being a Canterbridgian, or 28 years, depending on how you count the time. When did I leave? In October. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And now we're living in Plymouth. And what I've recently come to see is that I'm slowly adjusting to a different pace.
Really?
I was aware, I think of Cambridge as being, compared to other urban environment, as relatively low key and low pace, but no, it's not the same at all. Just watching people cross the street. So like you're wondering if somebody's put it into slow motion. It's kind of like a slow-mo effect. But no. And you get, you're very irascible as a city mouse going to the country. All these stupid, slow country mice, they get in your way. They make your car go slower because they're going slow. But it's all part of, the adventure, learning to survive in different environments.
I've heard terrific things about Plymouth. It's got a long, illustrious history.
It does.
For those of us that haven't seen The Rock, have you already had a chance to look at Plymouth Rock?
Well, I have to consider that one of the 8 great letdowns of the American historical panorama.
Really?
Yes. It's just a rock behind a fence, and the tide comes in periodically and goes out. And I think somebody carved 1622 into the rock.
Hey.
But it's not the original rock. It's just a rock that they put there to represent the original. I don't think it would have been more interesting to see the original rock, but that's the reality. So as I said, one of the 8 great letdowns of the American historical panorama. Be sure to make sure you don't miss it.
They do have a celebration there in Plymouth that you'll probably be interested in taking part in. That's the Indian Thanksgiving that takes place. You've heard about that?
Right. Well, the Wampanoags, yes, they've exerted the little political influence they have to basically get recognized in this Thanksgiving event that annually comes to Plymouth. And there's a real mixed message when you look back at history with what we took from the Indians and what they got from us. It's very one-sided. King Philip's War particularly is a very grievous wrong that we committed upon the Indians, I think. And it rose as a response to some of the wrongs. We basically were writing laws that they didn't understand and then persecuting them for breaking the laws. It's just a typical.
They didn't
swindle.
have a written language. It wouldn't have been possible to write an agreement, but it would have been possible to at least come to an agreement and then have us at least.
There were agreements in place.
Yeah.
But there were, as time went on, what they did, the white men, smart white men that we were, we wrote laws that basically allowed us to appropriate Native American lands. Because that's where all the money ultimately, that's where wealth and power reside.
Real estate.
In land. So anyway, Plymouth is very interesting. So the Wampanoags, who are trying to raise enough money to build a casino, I was going to say museum, a casino, I think in Taunton. They're very much involved in Plymouth, at least in the Plymouth Thanksgiving activities. and they're also involved with Plymouth Plantation. I once went to a woman that was the curator for the Indian artifacts and exhibits, because I was trying to design a back in my advertising, my commercial days, I was I wasn't the designer, but I was overseeing the design of wrapping for Cape Cod breads.
Oh,
And I was going to use a story about a Native American, and with a picture, but I never found a picture that I wanted to have done up. So we had covered our flavors with enough, with the windmill and with the lighthouse,
Yeah.
typical Cape Cod scenes. We didn't need the Wampanoags. But Plymouth is a very nice place, and it's, as I said, it's slower pace, and I think I'm starting to get nervous about it becoming hot. It seems like there's a lot of development, a lot of people coming there. We don't want you. We like you to visit, but we don't need you there to live. We got plenty of people who live. We don't need more. Stay in Cambridge. I left that behind, so
yeah.
on purpose, just so you know.
Well, I hope it's enjoyable, and I hope you make as many friends there as you've made in Cambridge, and that it's a pleasant place to live, Paul.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that,
All the
Terrence.
best.
I appreciate that. And obviously, I'm still connected to Cambridge,
We hope that continues into decades and going forward.
If one has decades, you never know.
That's our wish that you have that.
Yes.
So, as far as the issues are concerned in the Bernie Sanders campaign, we've been mentioning before we started today that the fascinating thing and the deplorable reality of this election cycle is the fact that the issues don't seem to be what the press concentrates on for long enough to help the electorate actually understand that issues are important. And the candidates often change their position in reference to issues depending upon the audience they're speaking to. Mm-hmm. One of the main crises that we have that should be talked about is global warming, climate change, but that hasn't been spoken about much by anyone, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, who's brought it up a number of times.
Well, Hillary's a fracker, whether she
True.
admits to it or not. She's a fracker, and so it's not particularly in her. I mean, she talks about it, about the environment kind of generally, and probably in a better tone than Donald Trump. Chump, Trump, hump, Trump. All these different rhymes come to me when I'm saying that. Chump was the one that I kind of enjoyed, though. Donald Trump. And who I think can easily be beaten by anybody who has the balls to call him a bullshit artist. He's a bullshit artist. And I think anybody that had to face him as an advocate, because he's going to be throwing a lot of crap at Hillary, and he's calling her crooked Hillary, and I think that'll stick because she is crooked.
It's true, yeah.
I don't think he'd know what to do with Bernie. He called Bernie Crazy Bernie, but
Is that the moniker he's come up with?
up till now,
Well,
he has
I
a
mean-
fondness for Bernie because he sees that Bernie got screwed even more than he did. So he's got, in some ways, he's on Bernie's side.
I've heard the two of them compared, actually, that they're similar. I can't see similar, with the exception that they might be populistic in nature. I can't see a similarity to their programs at all.
You know, I would
Am I
say-
wrong at that?
I would say psychologically there's a strong similarity in one regard, and in one important regard. Trump, in the moment that he speaks, is being authentic. He's being authentic to himself, but he's being authentic. He's not saying, I should say this to meet somebody's needs. In the moment, this is
He
what he
shoots
thinks.
right.
And what he says changes from one moment to the next, but it doesn't matter. He's being authentic. And Bernie's being authentic. What he says is what he believes, and he's been saying it for 40 years. So fine, believe him already.
That's the difference, that Bernie Sanders has been saying these things for 30 and 40 years and backing it up with his votes in Congress or in the Senate.
Right.
And Donald Trump has been saying it for 2 minutes, and he'll be changing that,
Yeah, he's a salesman too. I mean, the best thing about a salesman is when he can believe himself then he can sell to anybody. And that's kind of part of what we're seeing here. He's a salesman run amok, and he sold himself, and now we've got to deal with him. But we were talking about the media, and the media not only not staying with issues. There was a classic moment when I think Andrea Mitchell was trying to get Bernie to comment on Trump, and Bernie just kept talking about the need for income equality and things of this sort. And she just kept asking a question, and he would respond to the renewed question by talking about whatever he was talking about, ignoring all that personality bullshit. But the media has the inability to look at a political race in any other way but as a horse race. So you're never talking about the issues, you're talking about who's ahead of who. That's the whole thing for for this really vapid, insipid little mindless press that we have to deal with. And the other thing is that they establish and they maintain the corporate point of view about whatever the news happens to present. You folks probably have not heard anything about all the rampant election fraud that Hillary has perpetrated in her quest for the presidency. It's been unstoppable. And yet the corporate media, and I sent letters to the New York Times, to the Boston Globe, just chiding them for not accepting and dealing with their responsibility as a free press. They have a responsibility to the republic, to the people, and to their own sense of honor. I mean, Woodward and Bernstein would not live in this era because everything's being squelched. It's crazy, crazy. So you folks don't know it, but you're being fed censored news. That's the upshot of it.
It's true.
It's the upshot. They're not telling you about the rallies that have broken all records for Bernie. They're not telling you about the fundraising that's been unstoppable even after the election was clinched by Clinton, which is bullshit by itself. And the media, actually, they determine people's ability or interest in voting by the night before the last major primary declaring Hillary the winner.
Yeah.
Prematurely.
Before it even took place.
Right.
Before the vote could have been counted.
Right. The vote won't happen until July. She's not the winner. She doesn't have enough votes to qualify as the presumptive nominee. If you anticipate the votes that she will get from special delegates, she does. But they don't vote until July 25th. So till then, it's an open race. Bernie has over like 1,090 or something like that, maybe 1,900 delegates.
Yeah.
It will be a very interesting convention. He's going to force the matter. They're going to be worried about his possibly splitting. If he splits, everybody that supported him will go with him.
I think that's true, yeah.
And he's got Jill Stein who's knocking on his door, and people are just saying, go for an independent or a third-party run. And I kind of wonder if he might have enough support. Hillary squelched his support. He might have enough support by now to actually win. And he'll win Republicans and independents in a way that Hillary never could. She'll win the Republicans that are backing Republicans. They're all excited about her. Did you see that Henry Paulson?
No, tell us about Paulson.
Paulson was the Secretary of the Treasury when in 2007 and 8, when everything kind of fell apart, when the housing bubble burst. And there are now articles arising as to whether or not his not seeing the potential beforehand and acting on it didn't help. He used to be the chief executive of Goldman Sachs, and they had a terrible, terrible position at the beginning when he could have stopped it and he could have prevented the whole thing from collapsing. But by waiting, they were able to sell their, what do they call it, their hold in really bad stocks. They unloaded it on everybody else. Anyway, that's just come out. And at the same time, he also has endorsed Hillary. And she's got the potential endorsement of one of the Koch brothers, who thought she was pretty good. And Henry Kissinger. These are
what a team!
I wouldn't let them endorse a super list.
That sounds like a catastrophe.
Sickening. I'm surprised Bush hasn't come out and supported her.
I think that might be in the wings.
So here's the thing, folks. If the FBI, in its wisdom, acts before the convention and acts honestly and openly, transparently, I think she'll be indicted. she has committed, she destroyed evidence with this whole business of wiping 30,000 emails. That wasn't just an innocent destroying of her yoga emails. That was evidence. So she's destroyed evidence, and she's basically trying to cover it up. And so ultimately, the crime that she committed, which will turn out to have national security consequences, I believe. I think it already has. Russia has all these, there are emails that have turned up in a Russian court. So make of that what you will. Anyway, I think she's, by calling all this attention to her emails, I think she opened up a Pandora's box. I think what they'll find is evidence of significant pay for play when she was Secretary of State, and Clinton was getting, her husband was getting all these incredible, he raised his price 2 or 3 times and was getting all these speaking engagements. He spoke in Russia for $500,000.
And the money was channeled for the speaking engagements into the foundation, I believe. Isn't that the case?
No. They got paid, the money for speaking, they got directly, as though they earned it from the sweat of their brow. The money that went into the Clinton Foundation was for things like approving a deal for arms to Saudi Arabia.
Oh.
Yes, pretty heavy stuff.
Wow.
And other arms deals and they've tracked all the donations to the Clinton Foundation to different asks that people had made or countries had made to Secretary of State, to the State Department.
Oh my God.
The State Department has a lot of control over commerce. One of the things that she did under her watch was she agreed to the sale of this uranium holding company that owned like 1/5 of the rights to the 1/5 of the world's uranium, which is a strategic mineral for us. And so Russia bought it, and now it's pretty much nationalized it. And so they have this. They don't have the control of the entire market, but they've got enough to create havoc with their other energy holdings.
To manipulate the market.
Yeah, that's where Bill Clinton got $500,000 for a speaking engagement. So I think there's enough there that it'll be very hard for Loretta Lynch to not accept a recommendation to indict or to appoint a special prosecutor.
Who gives that recommendation? Do we know?
I think it would be Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General. I think she's got to decide to prosecute, set somebody else above the situation, or just to walk away from it and just give Hillary a pass. They can't. It's too highly focused now. James Comey, head of the FBI, is the one that was able to resist the Bush pressure to sign something. He threatened to resign if they went ahead and did something, and he forced them to back down. So somebody who theoretically, who knows if he's still as a man of integrity as he was, but theoretically is a man of integrity. He's proven it. So there are a lot of theories, but the reality is it always comes down to the human factor. Is Obama going to interfere? Nah. His legacy, she's already crapped out his legacy with the Secretary of State foolishness. And now you look at it and you think that must have been the price he paid for her to become a supporter after she gave up. That was obviously, she probably insisted on becoming Secretary of State. She had this thing, in her mind, she had it all figured out.
Yeah.
So she's too calculating. I don't want her up there. I don't want her in charge of anything. I wouldn't want her in charge of strawberry preserves.
She hasn't got the integrity, and proof of this integrity is not only what she did in the State Department, but in the many years that she has worked politically, and most recently her manipulations of campaigns, the primary voting situations in the primary campaigns and in the caucuses.
She has to take responsibility. It may have been a DNC, but she has to take responsibility. It certainly is not without her knowledge.
She's the one that profits from it.
Right. Right. So she can get a by having a scapegoat, Deborah Wasserman Schultz. But I don't know how they pulled it off. There were times when they could have gotten Bernie's donor list, because the DNC has all that stuff, has the master list, everything. And I think they must have given it to her. It's been pretty it's been pretty bad out there, and I don't understand. It's the one thing I don't understand is why Bernie hasn't called any more attention to it than he has.
No, it's his integrity. If my opinion on this is that Sanders' integrity, it's not only his political correctness, but also the integrity. If he's not certain of the background on things, an individual with integrity will not challenge it until the facts are there. He may have an assumption and the ideas of who would carry on the manipulation of the primaries or purge the voter rolls, but he wouldn't know this exactly. He could not prove it, so he doesn't speak about it.
I don't know about proving it, but I think, we hold the rest of the third world, we hold them accountable in elections in some cases to the exit polls. It has to be within 2% of the exit polls or it's declared a fraud. There's been such deviation in at least 13 of the biggest states from the exit polls to the reality that was shown in the vote count, that you don't have to say, you don't have to prove anything. You just say, listen, this is obviously wrong. Our own standards say that this is wrong, because you've had it up to like 13 or 20% deviation. It's just really, it's staggering how blatant they were. They were audacious, they were arrogant, and they were just absolutely going to take his lunch and leave him the soiled wrapper as a reminder.
All right. And it shouldn't be necessary even to prosecute if you have evidence that the exit polls deviate from the counted ballots. All one has to do is then request that the results can be challenged.
Well, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't challenge. I mean, you can challenge. Anybody can open their mouth and say, "I challenge those results." The reality is, nothing will change. You will be refuted, and they will just go about business as they normally do. So you put a lot of energy into something that's going to get you nowhere.
So Bernie doesn't even expose himself to that.
Well, except that maybe the mainstream media, which has absolutely twisted itself into pretzels to try to avoid looking at election fraud.
Closed its eyes and turned around.
Yes, it's staggering. It's staggering how little they report on what is so obvious to everybody else. It's like the dead elephant in the room, and they pretend it isn't there, and it's starting to smell. It's just ridiculous. So, what was I saying?
In reference to this dead elephants in the room, the Young Turks have a position that maybe we can run this. We would like to thank CBS, NBC, and the Young Turks for the opportunity to run this episode regarding the elections and the election subjects. We'll run this for the first couple of minutes.
Hi. So number one is ABC News. As one of our viewers mentioned here, and as we're covering the debate live, as we do every time, tytnetwork.com/live, Emily Norton tweeted out, and we retweeted and talked about it on there. Oh, this entire debate, not a single question about climate change. Mm-hmm. Amazing. In the Republican debate, they're talking about national security. Here they were talking about national security. And as Wes pointed out on the live coverage, the Pentagon says it's a national security issue and a very significant one. And in this debate, they also covered domestic policy. Whether it was national security or domestic policy, you couldn't fit a climate change question in at all, as it is not only a very pressing question for the world, but certainly for Democratic voters. And then secondly, as always, not a single question about campaign finance reform. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders mentioned it several times. He said, look, if you're talking about healthcare, one of the problems is that healthcare companies are bribing Congress. Same goes for Wall Street and other people that are creating the problems that we see in America. But he did that unprompted because they're never going to ask about campaign finance.
They're never going to ask about campaign financing. It's true.
Right. Corporate media has its own agenda, and the agenda is to keep everybody in some silly way kind of placated with getting excited by a race. You want to know who's ahead, who passed the quarter mile marker and was in
first,
front.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the issues, has nothing to do. Bernie Sanders' rallies were not covered by the mainstream media. They broke records in New York. The police in New York said it was 60,000 people came to see him when he was in Washington Square.
Tens of thousands.
But they said 60, and the campaign said 48. And it may have to do with counting the people that were 3 blocks down. The streets were totally jammed with people. You know, Hillary couldn't fill a little groceria with people. It's just amazing. She's not that popular to anybody that she certainly couldn't get a majority of people to vote for her. I don't believe that. Anyhow.
I don't know why that makes me happy, the fact that Hillary Clinton can't fill a groceria with her supporters. But in any case, we've seen Bernie Sanders' campaign speeches, and it's a terrific turnout.
It is, and the speeches themselves are fabulous. There's one he just had recently. They're all similar because he's got a simple story to tell folks. You're getting screwed. Here's how you're getting screwed. We should give you health care as a right. And you're not getting it at all. You're getting it, it's very expensive, it's very awkward. You don't want to use any of it because your deductible is so friggin' high. So he's talking about stuff that relates to your life every day. You know, you can't afford to send your kids to college. He's talking about tuition-free public university. And it can make a difference in everybody's life. It just could. You know, and to expand Social Security can make a difference in my life, your life.
Exactly. Single payer health care and
Yes.
Social Security.
Yes, it's wonderful. I get Medicare now, and it's nice to have.
Let's see what the Young Turks bring up for the next subject matter here.
Reform. They don't ask, so far in all the debates, Republican debates, Democratic debates, the biggest beneficiaries of campaign finance and this corrupt system are the TV companies. They get all the TV ads in the political cycle, and they haven't asked one question about the corruption involved in how we finance our elections, the private financing for millionaires, billionaires, and corporate America. Now, so that's pretty bad. That's a pretty bad fail. What's tied with it? The DNC for scheduling a debate on a Saturday night again. I mean, here as we're doing it live, it is almost 11 o'clock at night on Saturday. I mean, these are, yes, hardcore people who care about politics will watch it. You guys have watched it with us. But they want to exclude people who have less knowledge, care less, and might think, I didn't know about Bernie Sanders' position. Now that I found out about it, I might switch over to Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Look, the DNC is run by a former campaign co-chair of Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It is not a...
There's the name, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yes.
That is
yes. A hated name. For
a name that will go down in infamy. There can be little question about that.
Right.
And she calls all of the shots in reference to organizing when the debates take place, counting the votes in the primaries.
She's in charge of the Democratic system.
Machine.
The network. I mean, all those Democratic parties in different Democratic states that had to be participating in the effort to make Hillary the winner, and whether they suppressed votes or whether they rigged votes, whether they flipped votes, they were still, somebody sent that word out to the different little satellites and tributaries that exist out there.
Right, on what to do.
On what to do, right. And they probably sent their team of hackers into state by state.
I'm sure that's the case.
Yeah.
But it's not being called, they're not being
The media could care
investigated.
less. It's
The
a story of the decade, and the media could care less. That's the bizarre thing. Bill Clinton approved a change in what they allow in terms of corporate ownership of the media. Now it can be consolidated because of the bill that Bill Clinton signed. And that's led to this, basically this limited
accountability.
ownership, of the media, owned by, some big names, and that's it. And Rupert Murdoch is one of the big names, and that's not going to do much for clarity and truth. So all you need is somebody that's just so worried about their own, pocket that they're going to take from everybody else's.
Corporate finance is one of the points that was mentioned, and it does not look as though anyone in this entire campaign cycle is interested in looking at corporate finance except Bernie Sanders. And Sanders, if I'm correct on this, considers that to be a primary issue because of the Supreme Court Citizens United decision
Right.
and the fact of the Supreme Court allowing unlimited financial contributions and financial control in elections. That is in itself is a scandal that Sanders has been talking about, but it looks as though no other candidates, and certainly not the corporate media, is interested in discussing.
How many years ago was Citizen United promulgated?
I'm not sure. I think it was 2008, 7 or 8, something like that, I believe.
Okay. Well, think about it. Think about how long it took to corrupt the entire system. The second party has now become just like the first party, which was owned by corporate money before. Now they own both parties, and that's the whole kit and caboodle.
That's how, in less than 10 years.
Yeah. That's what money can do. The power of money. It's ridiculous. And what's happening now, even with Trump, is a response to that. Trump doesn't. Somebody I recently heard a quote that if he wins, he won't owe anybody, because he's self-financed and the people are...
I don't even know if he spent any money. All of the media seem to be running to him if he, tweets something.
He didn't have to write.
There
There was a time when he had all this free publicity and he made hay with it.
They said it was worth $1 billion. That's some of the estimates they come up with.
Yeah. When I was down in, I think I told you, I was down in Trinidad, and they had CNN on, and it was all Trump all day. It was absolutely sickening. I have no idea what the story was, but they just beat the damn thing to death. They flogged it mercilessly. God.
I'm smiling at this because of the ridiculousness of this campaign. It's been impossible to estimate what's happening. It's very, very difficult to see how the next 6 weeks is going to play out. It is a catastrophe because the issues are not being spoken about, because the primaries have been stolen and the results manipulated, because the rolls have been purged, and indicating of what may happen in the general election. We have no idea who will be elected, because the primaries have already shown how much manipulation takes place even at that phase of the process.
Republicans were traditionally the ones who cheated. Now we've proven that we can do it every bit as much as them, so God only knows what's going to happen in the general election. But I think we all have to step back and realize that this is the most interesting drama that I can recall being played out on the public stage. You've got somebody who's a proven criminal, who's the Democratic nominee, and at any moment there could be a visit from the FBI. Is that the doorbell? At any moment there could be a visit from the FBI, and there's also any moment there could be a release from Julian Assange, who says that they have these emails from her that really show her indictable, or Guccifer, who has already released stuff about the DNC hack, could release more stuff. All these things are out there. They potentially could blow everything up sky high. So this drama is fascinating for that. And you've got Bernie Sanders, someone who's not going to be pushed out. You can say what you want, but you're not going to push him out by pressuring him to kiss Hillary and make up. It ain't going to happen. And you also have all of us unrepentant burners that are damn well not going to vote for Hillary. I'm a Bernie or buster. I just can't. I know that she's been so deceitful that I can't see her getting the fruits of her crime. I just can't see that. I can't participate in that. So
It would
fascinating.
be. Do you feel it would be dishonest to participate and to give your vote to Hillary after what she's done?
Oh God, yes. She sold the country. She sold the country's. She basically took stuff out of the country's pocket and sold it to others. For money, for her own personal gain. Donald Trump, and then just to make this whole drama even fascinating, is you've got a buffoon who's playing out what a fool we all are by showing that you'll vote for anybody. So that's fascinating. So this is so Shakespearean in terms of
It's true.
what we're seeing happen, that it's fascinating.
It's absolutely true.
This should be a great novel. I should write this.
Yeah, I think your appreciation of this as an expert ad man is well placed.
Thank you. Thank you.
However, my fear in all of this is that we are missing an opportunity similar to the opportunity we missed in the year 2000 when Al Gore was calling upon a change and a recognition that climate change is the central issue of the new century, and that we have a limited amount of time to actually invoke real changes. And
Well, we didn't miss that chance. The election was stolen.
the election was stolen.
So, I mean, that's where we missed our chance. We had to decide whether or not to get on the barricades and say we're not accepting this, and we chose not to. And the same thing when Bush stole from Kerry. Twice it was stolen, and we just watched it and said, oh, so what? You know,
Aren't we doing the same thing now with Trump and
well, but
Hillary?
well, certainly the corporate media would have us do the same thing, and others would have us do the same thing. The power of Facebook and other online entities has made it impossible for them to get away with it the same way.
Wow.
It is powerful, and that's why Philadelphia, there's been a lot of discussion about Philadelphia.
What to do in Philadelphia? That is the question.
Right, that's weeks away, and having online...
I think it's exactly 4 weeks away, actually.
It's
Mid 20.
the internet has changed this whole game.
It has.
That's the thing. If we could see it all together, the internet has basically fueled people's commitment to Bernie, basically fueled their acceptance of his message, which the corporate media and the paid politicians have allowed the discussion to become so rightist, that we're talking about cutting Social Security, we're talking about doing this and crippling that, and we accept it. And Bernie is saying, wake up, guys, wake up. Not only is that not acceptable, this is what we want. We want health care, we want free universities, we want expanded Social Security, we want minimum wage, we want everybody to have a good life. We don't
And
have
there's
to
money
accept
enough
that.
for it.
There is, if you force
There
the
is.
people that have all the money to pay some of it, absolutely.
Right.
And so that's what we've been allowed to just sort of watch this whole thing diminish. And I describe this as his waking us up from our narcoleptic acceptance of a Scrooge-like American government that's as envisioned by billionaires. That's basically what this whole thing was. And someone wrote back to me about that line, and that's why it sticks in my mind. A narcoleptic acceptance of a Scrooge-like American government as envisioned by billionaires.
That's a great line.
It was a great line, even if I wrote it myself. So, but no, he's woken us up, and I don't think we're gonna. In that thank you letter, in the thank you ad that I wrote, I said we felt the burn and we're never going back, and I think that's true. We know now what the issues are. The Occupy movement did a great service to us. I didn't see it at the time, and I couldn't figure out what was the value of it.
2011.
Yeah, it was kind of like the John the Baptist.
It's true.
It came in front of the real change, and not to make Bernie Jesus-like, but that's kind of, he embodies that whole revolution, that whole change. And if the corporate media has its own way, then the revolution will not be televised, except online. It just won't.
Except through Facebook.
Yeah, CNN has no interest in the revolution. ABC has no interest in the revolution.
But rather in the status quo.
Exactly.
I think corporate media, as you've clearly pointed out, corporate media is interested in the status quo. They profit from the system, as was mentioned by the Young Turks, by the fact that the television ads, the hundreds of millions of dollars in paid television ads,
God, yeah. That's a lot of money.
is exactly what corporate media is interested in doing. They profit from it. They profit from the entire system, and have been not only shown themselves to be susceptible to this structure, but profit directly from it.
Yes, and I think that they have to take some responsibility for it. They've not just gone along, they've been creating, what the whole slipstream really is. By not acknowledging the truth of what's happening, the election fraud, her basically laundering money, sending it to these local Democratic parties, and then taking it all back. She gets 97% of that money back. She has all her donors who have maxed out with her give money to this Hillary Victory Fund at the DNC.
Yeah.
That money goes to local Democratic parties,
Right.
Montana Democratic Party, which funnels the money back to Hillary's campaign.
Oh,
Yes, this was shown, and the media says nothing about it. It's just amazing. It is amazing. She's done a great job. She and Bill have done a fabulous job of stealing this election, this nomination.
well, they've had a lot of time to plan it.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton in the 1990s has had 15 years, 25 years to look at precisely how it's done, and there can be no question about it. He's obviously learned something, and
Yeah.
he and Hillary
Slick
Clinton,
Willie.
he and his wife.
They call him Slick Willie. That was one of his nicknames.
A friend of mine has asked me if it's not embarrassing being in front of the camera and saying these things. That not at all. The reality is that the election has been stolen, very similar to the way that Bush stole the elections against
Yeah.
Gore and, as you mentioned,
Kerry.
against Kerry,
In Ohio.
and that the reality of how these primaries were manipulated, caucuses were manipulated, is a scandal that is not being talked about, as you mentioned, is being neglected, and that is, if not criminal, close to it.
Oh, it's definitely criminal. You can't suppress people's votes, and that I can't imagine that isn't breaking a crime somewhere. I hope somebody who's involved in Frontline sees us, because you have the greatest story to tell in the stealing of the Democratic nomination in 2016. It's all there. The evidence is already gathered for you. People doing that in state after state. California has a lawsuit. There are other states that are going to have lawsuits. This thing is far from over. And once those lawsuits hit, and I think the one in California is pretty good, because the guy that's working on it, Bob Friedis, is he's pretty much an old hand, election law. I think there's a potential that they by themselves could undo Hillary's campaign, because it's massive fraud. And they're doing it first in, I think, Ohio, because that has the strongest RICO laws. They're making this a racketeering thing as well.
Oh, is really?
If they get it approved in one state, they can go to other states
Oh,
as
terrific.
part of that. Yeah, no, there are people out there that are working hard and diligently on this. The DNC and Hillary's campaign was so heavy-handed in the way they did it. They were audacious. They thought that nobody would care or nobody would do anything about it. So,
And that they may feel that they have the political or financial clout to be able to intimidate or suppress anyone, much as they've done in the past.
right. The history of the Clintons is not that they prove to be innocent. It's proved that they get away with stuff. Bill definitely had dalliances, and some of the stuff is just real. That whole White House travel gate was Hillary basically giving that business to her friends. She fired all the people in the White House travel office, and she gave the business to friends. Like she gave that donor that seat on the strategic nuclear. There's some commission that you
Yeah,
have
oh
a
my
top
God.
secret clearance for, and it was given to a donor.
Nepotism.
Yeah, she benefits herself. That's the main thing. The country has suffered with her as Secretary of State. It's really sad. I think this is based on the research that I've done.
And if this is the method operandi that she uses before being elected, one would imagine
Right.
what the situation will be after she has this immense power.
But the other thing about her is that she is a lightning rod for controversy and scandal. As soon as she's in office, people will be trying to impeach her, and they will have good reason to impeach her.
Well, they tried to do that with her husband, so I mean,
Right.
they had enough.
They did impeach her.
What?
He just didn't get kicked out by the Senate.
It's true, right?
He was impeached. Impeach means that you just draw a bill of impeachment against somebody and,
Yes.
and you vote it through. So he was impeached, but he never got convicted by the Senate, which is where he would have his trial. But he embarrassed himself.
Where's the attorney Starr? What's he doing at the moment? Ken Starr?
Yes.
Is he free to file a
No,
complaint?
he's having his own travails.
I believe I heard something like that.
Yes,
right?
yes. Apparently, a man who had such incredible concern about the president's morals really wasn't particularly vigilant when it came to his student athletes' sexual harassment
Oh
of
my
women.
God, that was an incredible scandal, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he's lost his job as the chancellor, I think the
I believe that was
president,
his position.
but he still has a position as a law teacher. So he still gets a salary from those guys.
God, what a scandal.
Yeah. Well, this is the country we live in. It's just, if you know somebody, if you're well positioned, you're golden.
That's true. So the Young Turks here, let's see if we can find out what the next position is that they challenge.
Everyone in politics knows that if you want to bury something, you put it on a Friday or a Saturday night. By doing this, they're actively burying it because Hillary Clinton has better name recognition and she wants to coast on that, and then DNC is trying to help her do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So if we're having a discussion about who the biggest loser is, I would say that it's actually the American people. And I'm not saying that because I think they're losers. I'm saying that they're being robbed of the opportunity to hear Bernie Sanders' political points, his agenda, what he plans on doing. They're being robbed of real choices. And that's the issue that I have with the DNC, with the way that these debates are run, with the few debates that have happened so far that give Bernie Sanders and other candidates an opportunity to voice their opinions and their policy ideas. The biggest loser is our democratic process and how it's being completely undermined by all of these dirty political tricks. So I hate the fact that this is on a Saturday night. I hate the fact that people think that Bernie Sanders has done something illegal or wrong because of this nonsense voter data thing that occurred on.
That was an interesting point about his apologizing to Hillary Clinton for something that appeared on his server.
Yeah, I don't quite understand. He didn't apologize. He fired the guy who supposedly found the information and at first didn't say anything about it. But, they had found that before. It happened once before, and they reported it. So this was the second time that the information, that basically some sort of firewall came down.
Right.
That gave people access. We didn't use it. I mean, Bernie's too squeaky clean to do anything like that. And we know what she ended up doing to him. At the time, who thought of it as something that was necessarily going to benefit her? But whatever it was, at some point she got a hold of the list, or somebody that was in service to her or to her campaign got a hold of the list and really played games with it. The other thing I was going to say was that the Young Turks are basically a response to the corporate media and the fact that there is a hungry audience that's being unfed by the corporate media, by the mainstream, what I call mainstream mediocrity, because they are mediocre. They absolutely are mediocre, and they censor everything that you. I mean, the media has to censor something in terms of deciding what to publish, but generally they don't censor the stuff that should be, bread and butter to the populace, which is who's running for office, information about that candidate. So they were really just trying to help anoint Hillary, and they resented Bernie coming in and saying, "I want to have a shot at this too." So, I mean, I'm characterizing them. I think ultimately there's greed at the core. You're right. They have a ton of money that they get from this whole system the way it is. The billionaires give the money to the politicians give it to the TV stations.
And then the politicians then have a way of controlling what the TV stations, what the media actually brings, what they support, what they neglect, what they discuss.
Paul Simon called it a loose affiliation of millionaires and billionaires in that song "Boy in the Bubble," I think it was.
You can depend on Paul Simon for those things.
Yes, he was absolutely right.
So the crisis in 2016 in an election cycle, which is Shakespearean in the development of the structures and the intrigues that are going on.
Yes, at any moment, an army can come marching from the right. This is like Game of Thrones.
It's true.
At any moment, an army can come in and decide the day, who wins and who loses. It could be the FBI at the last moment comes in, or Julian Assange with his WikiLeaks army comes in. This is Game of Thrones. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And then you got the Trump, the dump, the chump. Oh God, the chimp.
A loose cannon, the reality of Donald Trump as being an individual, and to be completely honest, listening to someone trying to dissect what his policies are, Trump has not spoken about his policies. He never gets that far, I don't believe. He doesn't have a policy position. He speaks in such general terms and such nondescript language that it's difficult to see at all what he has for policies.
And a few things that he said, he may have already said just the opposite a day or two later. He's done that a few times. I think he's artful in the way he's taken this whole Republican primary process and absolutely made everybody unimportant, secondary to him. He just stole it so neatly, it's almost embarrassing. Questions about anything totally get turned around. He doesn't answer any questions. So I think I think Bernie would do a much better job of keeping him talking about the issues. He really would. Because that's all Bernie talks about is the issues. So
the question is that Trump is having problems raising money, that Clinton has 12-point advantage from the latest poll in reference to him. But would you see that billionaires would find a greater interest in Hillary Clinton than they would in
I think they already
Trump?
have.
They have.
I think so. What Koch said was very pointed to talk about the fact that he found her pretty acceptable. That was not just one person speaking. That was one person speaking to a lot of people.
And that is frightening.
Yeah. Well, that's what you got with Hillary. She's basically a Republican. Their Democratic Party is just Republican light. It's sad to say. Maybe some social issues create a difference, but that's about it.
And hawkish as far as the military card is concerned.
That's the other thing. Yes, because war makes money. War makes incredible money for people, for businesses, for corporations. The only problem is that it kills people, and I think that's kind of a disadvantage, especially if you don't want to kill people and you don't think it's worth somebody making a lot of money to kill all these people. I mean, Bush led to the death and destruction of maybe 500,000 people or more. In the Middle East?
Before the invasion of Iraq, 500,000 children died, starved, in the embargo situation previous to the invasion in 2003.
Well, that's an important statistic. I keep forgetting. Yep.
And
I remember Madeleine Albright saying that it was, that was just a cost of doing what they were doing.
We've discussed also before the show in reference to the common market and to the EU and the Brexit vote in which the United Kingdom decided to exit the European Union. Would you...
Can I comment on that? I'd love
Please.
to. You know what I find fascinating about this? Is that almost instantly there was a sense of regret, like I didn't realize what we were buying with this vote.
I didn't realize that my vote was going to be counted and that there were going to be consequences.
Buyer's remorse popped up almost instantly. It's fascinating. And I think that the way the system is, they've got 2 years to, once they have to basically enact a certain article of their constitution, by declaring that their intent to leave or something like that.
Right.
And until they do that, there's no intent to leave. Britain hasn't notified anybody that they intend to leave officially. So the vote was cast. So they've got to figure out what's in their best interest. Should we wait a year before we invoke that? Then we have 2 years to make it happen. I think there's enough time and enough opportunity to see what is about to be lost I think people feel like nobody ever really explained what the value was to them.
I think that's true. I think it's like this primary process. The issues aren't being discussed. Nobody is.
What does Bernie represent? Bernie represents a lot,
Right.
And Hillary doesn't,
Right.
And people should see the TPP. Hillary's going to find a way to approve it as soon as she gets in. She's going to say, "Well, change this and change that," and those are nothing changes. And she say, "Well, now I find it acceptable." Whereas before it wasn't acceptable. Now it's I protected our jobs. She'll say something like that. She's a total bullshit artist. Bernie will send it, to the trash, throw it out the window.
Where it belongs.
Yeah, and this is a trade agreement that negotiated in private. How do you negotiate an
Secret. The entire all the decisions
Right.
and written materials are secret.
How do you negotiate? And I can understand negotiations being secret, but I can't understand an original. What's the offer? What's the reason for this? What are we trying to achieve? Have some discussion before they go into the private negotiations, because nothing gets done in public. I understand that, but this thing was totally nobody knew what was in it until somebody got. I think WikiLeaks kind of let people know what was in it, and then people got very concerned, as they should have been. It's another one of these hoaxes that are being perpetrated on people against their best interests.
Paul Sigurdsson, thanks ever so much for coming today and spending one of your first Mondays in Plymouth to return to Cambridge.
My pleasure. Thank you for
Speak to us here at What We Should Know. Thanks ever so much. We hope to have an opportunity in the future to perhaps at the time of the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, which I believe is 3 or 4 weeks from now. I believe it's in 4 weeks exactly. Mm-hmm. There should be a lot of information, a lot of interesting stuff taking place then. And
right.
Hope you'll join us.
There may be some very interesting news before then.